The howl that changed everything. The iron shackles had worn grooves into Sarah's wrists, deep enough that she'd stopped feeling the pain weeks ago. Now there was only numbness, cold as the stone walls of the dungeon that had become her entire world. She couldn't remember the last time she'd seen sunlight, couldn't recall the exact day they'd stripped away her name and called her only by a number. Prisoner 47. But tonight was different. Tonight, the storm came. Thunder cracked across the fortress like the bones of the earth breaking, and something primal stirred in Sarah's chest, something she'd thought they'd beaten out of her during those first brutal months. The wolf inside her, silent for so long, suddenly clawed at her ribcage, demanding to be heard. She'd learned to keep quiet. Silence meant survival in the dungeons beneath the Blackstone Pack's fortress. Silence meant they forgot about you for a few precious hours, but as lightning illuminated her cell through the barred window high above, Sarah felt her control slipping. The storm wasn't just outside. It was inside her, building, rising, unstoppable. When the howl tore from her throat, it wasn't a choice. It was a reckoning. The sound echoed through the corridors, feral and haunting, carrying years of anguish and defiance. She howled until her voice cracked, until tears streaked through the dirt on her face, until she had nothing left. Then she heard footsteps. Not the shuffling gait of the dungeon guards with their cruel hands and empty eyes. These steps were different, purposeful, commanding, each footfall resonating with undeniable authority. Sarah's wolf, exhausted from her outburst, suddenly went still, waiting. The footsteps stopped outside her cell. Through the darkness, she sensed him before she saw him. Power radiated from his presence like heat from a forge. When he finally stepped into the dim torchlight bleeding through the corridor, Sarah's breath caught. Alpha Cade Blackstone stood before her cell, rain-soaked and magnificent, his silver eyes piercing through the shadows to find her. The Alpha who had sentenced her here. The Alpha she'd been taught to fear above all others. He stared at her as if he'd seen a ghost. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice rough as gravel. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the iron bars. "That howl? I know that howl." Sarah pressed herself against the far wall, her chains rattling. She wanted to disappear, to become stone like the walls around her, but his eyes held her captive more firmly than any shackles ever could. "Who are you?" His question cut through the space between them. "And why do I feel like I've been searching for you my entire life?" What secret connects Sarah to the Alpha who imprisoned her? Keep reading to uncover a truth that will shatter everything they thought they knew. Ghosts of the Bloodline. Cade. Blackstone prided himself on control. At 29, he'd ruled the Blackstone Pack for 7 years. 7 years of maintaining order, enforcing law, protecting his people from the chaos that had nearly destroyed them during his father's reign. Control was everything. Control kept wolves alive. So why was his hand trembling as he reached for the key to this prisoner's cell? "Step back," he commanded, surprised by the hoarseness in his own voice. Sarah didn't move. Couldn't move. Her legs had long since forgotten how to support her weight for more than a few minutes. She watched, transfixed, as the Alpha, the most feared wolf in the Northern Territories, unlocked her cell door with fumbling fingers that seemed to contradict every story she'd heard about him. The door swung open with a groan of protesting hinges. Cade stood at the threshold, rain still dripping from his dark hair, his powerful frame filling the doorway. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Your eyes," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're amber. True amber." Sarah's throat constricted. She'd kept her gaze downcast for so long that she'd almost forgotten the color that had marked her as different, as dangerous. The guards had learned quickly not to look at her directly. Something about her stare unsettled even them. "There hasn't been a true amber wolf in 3 generations, Cade continued, taking a cautious step into the cell. "Not since the bloodline purge." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. The bloodline purge. The massacre that had taken everything from her, family, pack, future. She'd been 7 years old, hidden in a root cellar while her world burned above her. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, her voice raspy from disuse and her earlier howl. Cade's jaw tightened. Don't lie to me. Not about this." He moved closer, and Sarah caught his scent. Pine and rain and something else. Something that made her wolf stir with recognition she couldn't explain. "The records say all the Silver Moon wolves died that night. Every single one. Maybe the records were wrong." Sarah lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "Or maybe someone wanted everyone to believe they were dead." The air between them crackled with tension, part confrontation, part something neither was ready to name. Cade knelt down slowly, bringing himself to her level. Up close, she could see the storm reflected in his silver eyes, could see the muscle working in his jaw. "My father ordered that purge," he said quietly, each word seeming to cost him. "He believed the Silver Moon bloodline was a threat to pack stability, that the Amber Wolves held too much ancient power. He was wrong about many things." "Was he wrong about us being a threat?" Sarah asked bitterly. "Because it looks like that belief built this dungeon." "I built this dungeon," Cade corrected, and there was pain in his admission. "I built it to keep order after my father's chaos. I built it to prevent another bloodbath, but I never asked." He stopped, closing his eyes briefly. "I never asked who was actually being brought here, or why." A commotion erupted in the corridor above, shouts, the clatter of armor, boots pounding stone. "Alpha Cade!" A guard's voice echoed down the stairs. "Sir, we have a situation. The northern border." Cade was on his feet instantly, his posture shifting from vulnerable to commanding in a heartbeat. But his eyes lingered on Sarah for one more moment. "Don't move," he said. Then, with what might have been the ghost of dark humor, he added, "Well, I suppose those chains ensure that much." He was gone before she could respond, his presence leaving a void in the cell that somehow felt larger than her imprisonment. Sarah slumped against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd survived 3 years in this dungeon by becoming invisible, by letting them believe she was broken. But that howl had changed everything, and Alpha Cade Blackstone, the son of the man who'd murdered her family, had looked at her not with hatred or fear, but with something that terrified her far more. Recognition. The past refuses to stay buried, and some connections run deeper than blood. But will the truth save them, or destroy them both? The border breach. The northern border situation couldn't have come at a worse time, or perhaps it came at exactly the right time. Cade wasn't certain which possibility disturbed him more as he strode through the rain-soaked forest with his beta, Marcus, at his side.
"It's the Shadowfang pack,"
Marcus reported, his breath forming clouds in the cold air.
"They've sent an envoy.
Demanding an audience with you. Tonight." Cade's jaw clenched. The Shadowfang pack had been circling his territory for months, testing boundaries, probing for weakness. Their alpha, Dante Shadowfang, was known for two things: his tactical brilliance and his complete lack of mercy. What do they want? They wouldn't say. But Alpha Dante himself is here. He's brought 20 wolves with him. Marcus shot Cade a worried glance. He's never crossed into our territory personally before. This isn't a casual visit. No, it wasn't. Cade's mind raced, connecting threads he didn't want to connect. The timing was too convenient. That howl from the dungeon had been loud enough to carry beyond the fortress walls, especially during the storm when sound traveled strangely. If Dante had been anywhere near the border, where is he now?
The main hall.
Cade. Marcus grabbed his alpha's arm, stopping him mid-stride. Whatever's happening, you need to know something. 3 years ago, when that girl was brought to the dungeons, I wasn't beta yet, but I was in the room when the order came down. Cade went very still. Go on. Your father's last advisor, Counselor Bran, he's the one who identified her as a threat, said she was a spy, that she'd infiltrated the pack with plans to assassinate you. There was no trial, no investigation, just his word. Marcus's expression darkened. Bran died 6 months later. Natural causes, supposedly, but I always wondered. Why are you telling me this now? Because Bran had connections to the Shadowfang pack. And because I think whatever Dante Shadowfang wants, it has something to do with the prisoner in your dungeon. Dante Shadowfang was not what Cade had expected. The enemy Alpha stood in the center of the main hall, completely at ease despite being surrounded by black stone wolves. He was tall, his dark hair shot through with premature silver, his features sharp and calculating. When Cade entered, Dante's smile was all teeth. "Alpha Blackstone, thank you for receiving me on such short notice. You didn't give me much choice." Cade took his position on the raised platform, asserting his dominance over his own territory. "State your business, Dante, and make it quick."
"Direct. I appreciate that."
Dante clasped his hands behind his back, beginning to pace like a professor delivering a lecture. "I'll be equally direct. I've come for something that belongs to me, more precisely, someone." Cade's blood ran cold. "Explain." 3 years ago, a young woman vanished from a neutral territory under suspicious circumstances. She was under my protection, part of a treaty between several packs to shelter survivors of various conflicts. Dante's eyes gleamed. "I have spent considerable resources tracking her. Imagine my surprise when tonight, during this magnificent storm, I heard a howl I recognized, a howl from inside your fortress." "You're talking about prisoner 47? "I'm talking about Seraphina Silvermoon, daughter of Alpha Rowan Silvermoon and the last surviving member of her bloodline, or she was supposed to be under my protection as such." Dante's expression hardened. "Instead, I believe she's been rotting in your dungeon. Is that correct?" The hall erupted in murmurs. Cade's wolves exchanged shocked glances. Even Marcus looked stunned. An Alpha's daughter. In their dungeon. For 3 years. Cade fought to keep his expression neutral, even as his mind reeled. Not just any Amber Wolf. Not just a survivor of the purge his father had ordered. an Alpha's daughter. The last of her line.
You have proof of these claims?
Cade asked, his voice dangerous and low. Dante smiled, pulling a leather document case from inside his coat.
Birth records. Treaty documents bearing your father's own seal, agreeing to her protection in neutral territory, and communications from Counselor Bran requesting her transfer to Blackstone territory 3 years ago.
He tossed the case onto the floor between them.
He claimed she'd requested asylum with your pack. A lie, as it turns out. Cade descended from the platform and retrieved the case. His hands remained steady as he reviewed the documents, but his insides were churning. Every word Dante spoke was verified by the papers in his hands. Bran had fabricated everything, the accusations, the transfer, the imprisonment. But why? I want her released into my custody, Dante said. Tonight. Consider it compensation for the breach of treaty and 3 years of false imprisonment.
No. The single word dropped into the hall like a stone into still water.
Dante's eyebrows rose. No? She's in my territory.
She's my responsibility. Cade met the other Alpha's gaze unflinchingly.
If what you say is true, and I will verify every detail, then a crime has been committed against her under my watch. That makes her restitution mine to provide.
How noble, Dante said dryly, and convenient. Tell me, Alpha Blackstone, why would you want to keep the last Silver Moon wolf? Could it be that you've realized what she represents? The power in her bloodline? The legitimacy she could provide to—
Choose your next words carefully, Cade warned, power rolling off him in waves that made even his own wolves step back.
Dante held up his hands in mock surrender.
I'm simply stating facts. The Silver Moon line was the oldest in the Northern Territories. Some would say they had a stronger claim to leadership than even the Blackstone line. He paused. And some might find it very convenient if such a wolf were to ally herself with a current alpha.
The implication hung in the air, ugly and calculating. Political marriage, a merger of bloodlines to consolidate power.
Get out,
Cade said quietly.
I'm afraid I can't do that.
Not without her. You will leave my territory. Now, or I will have you removed. Dante studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly.
Very well. But Cade, if she's not treated properly, if I find out she's been harmed further, the Shadowfang Pack will take it as an act of war.
He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway.
Oh, and you should know, she's not the only one searching for Silver Moon survivors. There are others, and not all of them have honorable intentions.
Then he was gone, leaving Cade standing in a hall full of shocked wolves and documents that proved he'd been lied to for 3 years. Marcus approached cautiously.
Cade,
what do you want to do? What did he want to do? Cade looked down at the papers in his hands, at the birth record that named Seraphina Silvermoon, daughter of Alpha Rowan and Luna Alara, born under a full moon, marked as an amber wolf from birth, everything his father had tried to destroy, everything Cade had unknowingly helped to suppress by never questioning what happened in his own dungeons.
Bring the pack healer,
he said finally, and have the dungeon cleared, all prisoners transferred to the holding cells above ground, ones with windows and proper ventilation.
All of them?
All of them. And Marcus? Cade's voice dropped.
Find out everything you can about Counselor Bran. who he spoke to, who he worked for, and why he wanted Seraphina Silvermoon buried in the dark where no one would ever find her. As his beta hurried away, Cade remained standing in the empty hall, the storm still raging outside. In his mind, he kept seeing those amber eyes staring up at him, defiant and broken and somehow still burning with life. An Alpha's daughter, locked away in darkness because of his father's sins and his own willful blindness. He'd told Dante that restitution was his to provide. Now he had to figure out what that meant, and whether Seraphina Silvermoon would accept anything from the son of the man who'd destroyed her entire world. Some chains are made of iron. Others are forged from guilt and the weight of impossible choices. But breaking them might unleash something neither Alpha is prepared for. The truth in the shadows. Sarah hadn't expected the Alpha to return. She certainly hadn't expected him to bring a healer. The woman who entered her cell behind Cade was older, with kind eyes and silver-streaked auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid. She carried a leather satchel that smelled of herbs and something else, something that made Sarah's wolf whimper with longing. Hope, maybe, or the memory of gentleness.
"This is Nadia,"
Cade said, his voice carefully neutral. "She's our pack healer. She's going to examine your injuries." "No." Sarah pressed harder against the wall, her chains rattling. 3 years had taught her that when guards showed unexpected interest in your welfare, pain usually followed. "I'm fine." "You're not fine." Cade's voice softened slightly. "And I'm not asking permission. But I am asking you to trust us, just for tonight." "Trust?" The word came out as a bitter laugh. "The last time I trusted a Blackstone, I woke up in these chains." Something flickered across Cade's face. Guilt, maybe, or anger. But his voice remained steady. "I know, and we're going to talk about that. But first, you need medical attention. Those wounds are infected. How did he know that?" Sarah glanced down at her wrists, at the angry red lines spreading from beneath the iron. She'd been ignoring the fever for days, the way her thoughts had started to blur at the edges. Nadia knelt slowly, keeping her hands visible. "I can smell the infection from here, child. It's spreading to your blood. Without treatment, you'll die within the week." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but not unkind. "I've been healing wolves for 40 years. I know the difference between someone who needs help and someone who needs to die in chains. You're the former." Something about the healer's bluntness cut through Sarah's defenses, or maybe it was the fever talking. Either way, she found herself nodding. "I'll need those shackles off to treat her properly," Nadia said to Cade. "No." The refusal came from the doorway, where a hard-faced guard stood watching. "Alpha, regulations state." "Are you seriously quoting regulations to me right now, Garrett?" Cade's voice went deadly quiet. "In my presence? About my direct order?" The guard paled. "No, sir. I just thought—" "You thought wrong. Remove the shackles. Now." Garrett hurried forward with the keys, his hands shaking. As the iron fell away from Sarah's wrists, she gasped. The sudden absence of weight was almost more painful than their presence had been. Her arms dropped to her sides, muscles screaming from the unfamiliar freedom. Nadia caught her before she collapsed. "Easy. Your body doesn't remember how to hold itself up. That's normal." She guided Sarah into a sitting position, then began gently cleaning the wounds on her wrists with something that stung but smelled of sage and moonflower. Cade watched from near the door, his jaw tight. Sarah could feel his eyes on her, could sense the war happening behind his controlled expression. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why now? Cade was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled something from inside his jacket, a leather document case. Because I just learned that everything I was told about you was a lie. Over the next hour, while Nadia worked on treating her injuries, Cade told her about Dante Shadowfang's visit, about the documents proving her identity, her father's treaty, the fabricated charges against her, about Counselor Brand's betrayal. You're saying I've been here for 3 years because of a dead counselor's lies? Sarah's voice shook, with rage or grief or exhaustion, she couldn't tell. That none of this was necessary? I'm saying I should have questioned it. Cade's hands clenched into fists. I took control of this pack determined to be better than my father, to bring order and justice. Instead, I built a prison system and never once asked who was actually being imprisoned. He met her eyes. That ends now. What does that mean? It means you're being moved. Tonight, to proper guest quarters, with a healer on staff and... No. Both Cade and Nadia looked at her in surprise. No? Cade repeated. Sarah struggled to her feet, swaying but upright. Nadia's treatment had already begun working. The fog in her mind was clearing, strength returning to her limbs in small increments. Enough strength to stand, enough strength to face him. I'm not your guest. I'm not your responsibility. I'm not your restitution project. Each word came out harder than the last. I'm a prisoner you just discovered was wrongfully imprisoned. There's a difference. I'm trying to make this right, Cade said through gritted teeth. You can't. Sarah took a step forward, chains pooling at her feet. You can't make this right because what's done is done. 3 years, Alpha Blackstone. 3 years of my life. 3 years of believing that the whole world had forgotten I existed, that maybe the dungeon guard who said I'd be better off dead was actually right. Her voice cracked. You can move me to prettier chains if it makes you feel better. But don't pretend this is about justice. Then what do you want? The question exploded from him, raw and frustrated. Tell me what you want, Seraphina. The sound of her full name on his lips stopped her cold. No one had called her Seraphina in 3 years. She'd almost forgotten it was her name. I want... She faltered. What did she want? Her family back? Her pack? Her old life? All impossible. I want to know why. Why your father ordered the purge. Why Bran wanted me specifically in this dungeon. Why Dante Shadowfang showed up tonight claiming I was under his protection when I've never met him in my life. She met Cade's silver gaze with her amber one. I want the truth. All of it. Even the parts you don't want to tell me. Cade studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, but not here. Not in this cell. He glanced at Nadia. Is she strong enough to move? With support, yes. But she needs food, rest, and continued treatment. She'll have all of that. Cade turned back to Sarah. I have a private study in the East Wing. No guards, no witnesses, just you, me, and the truth. As much of it as I know. He paused. Will you come? It wasn't quite a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. Somewhere in between, an offering of choice to someone who hadn't had choices in a very long time. Sarah looked down at the chains on the floor, at the grooves worn into stone where she'd paced the limits of her prison.
at the darkness that had been her entire world. Then she looked at the doorway where torchlight flickered beyond, where truth, terrible and complicated, might finally be waiting. "I'll come," she said, "but I'm walking there myself." No guards, no escort, just me. A ghost of something, respect, maybe, flickered across Cade's face. Agreed. As Sarah took her first free steps in 3 years, her legs threatening to buckle with every movement, she felt the weight of Cade's gaze on her back. The son of the man who'd killed her family, offering truth in exchange for... what? Forgiveness? Understanding? She didn't know. But as she stepped over the threshold of her cell and into the corridor beyond, Sarah realized something that terrified her more than the chains ever had. Part of her wanted to find out. The truth has teeth, and some revelations leave scars deeper than iron ever could. But in the space between enemy and ally, something dangerous is beginning to grow. Bloodlines and betrayals. Cade's private study was nothing like Sarah had imagined. She'd expected cold stone, weapons on walls, displays of dominance. Instead, she found floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a fireplace with worn leather chairs pulled close, and windows that overlooked the forest. It looked like a refuge, not a throne room. "Sit," Cade said, gesturing to one of the chairs. "Please." Sarah remained standing, her body trembling from the exertion of walking but unwilling to show weakness. "Just tell me." Cade sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. For the first time, he looked tired. Deeply, bone-wearily tired. "The official record says the Silver Moon Pack was eliminated because your father refused to bend the knee to my father's authority. A rebellion, supposedly." "That's a lie." "I know." Cade moved to a cabinet and pulled out a worn leather journal. "This belonged to my father. I found it after he died, hidden behind a false panel in his chambers." He held it out to her. "I've read it exactly once. It's not easy reading." Sarah took the journal with shaking hands. The leather was soft with age, the pages yellowed. She opened it to a random entry, dated 6 months before the purge. "The Silver Moon Wolves pose a greater threat than I anticipated. It's not their military strength. They're smaller than half the packs in the territory. It's what they represent. The Amber bloodline. The old ways. As long as they exist, there will be wolves who question my authority, who remember when leadership was determined by bloodline rather than strength. Alara came to me again today. Still refuses my offer. Says she's loyal to Rowan, that their bond is unbreakable. She doesn't understand that I'm offering her everything. Power, position, survival. Her daughter would be raised as my heir. The bloodlines would unite. She called me a tyrant, said I'd lost sight of what it means to be an alpha. She's right, of course. But right doesn't keep packs safe. Right doesn't prevent chaos. Only power does that. If she won't see reason, I'll have no choice. The amber line ends. It has to." Sarah's hands clenched around the journal. "Your father... he wanted my mother?" "More than that." Cade's voice was rough. "According to later entries, they were intended mates. Matched by the elders when they were young. But your mother chose your father instead, a love match rather than a political arrangement. My father never forgave either of them." The room spun. Sarah sank into the chair, the journal falling open to another page.
It's done. The Silver Moon pack is gone. All of them. Rowan died first. Made sure he watched what was coming. Ilara fought like the warrior she was. The others... It doesn't matter. They're gone. But there's a problem. The daughter, Serafina. She wasn't there. Rowan hid her somehow. The scouts report signs of a child's presence, but no body. She's out there somewhere. An amber wolf. A 7-year-old witness to everything. I've put word out through every channel. She'll be found. And when she is, the entry ended there. Sarah turned the page with numb fingers, but the next entries were about pack business, territorial disputes. Nothing more about her. He spent the next 3 years hunting you, Cade said quietly. Then he died. A heart attack during a pack meeting. Sudden, unexpected. He paused. I was 22. Became alpha overnight. Spent the first year just trying to hold everything together. And stopped hunting me? Sarah looked up at him. I didn't know there was a hunt. My father kept that particular obsession secret. The official record said the Silver Moon line was extinct. End of story. Cade's jaw tightened. But someone knew you were alive. Someone who served my father and then served me. Counselor Bran Sarah remembered Bran, a cold-eyed man with a politician's smile. He'd been the one to greet her when she'd stupidly approached Blackstone territory seeking refuge 3 years ago. She'd been 19, alone, desperate. He'd promised safety. Instead, he'd delivered chains. Bran told me you'd infiltrated the pack as a spy, Cade continued. Said you'd made threats against my life, that you were planning to rally rebel factions against my rule. He had documents, witness statements. I never questioned it. His voice went hard. I should have. That's on me. Why didn't he just kill me? The question had haunted Sarah for 3 years. If I was such a threat, why lock me away instead of executing me? Cade walked to the window, staring out at the storm-dark forest. I've been thinking about that. My father's journal suggests he wanted you alive. Wanted to use you somehow. Your bloodline, your legitimacy. Maybe Bran had similar plans. Or maybe someone else did. Sarah forced herself to her feet, moving to stand beside him. Dante Shadowfang showed up awfully fast after my howl, and he knew exactly who I was. You've never met him? Never. But... Sarah hesitated, then decided truth demanded truth. After the purge, I was found by a woman named Elena. She was part of a network that moved survivors to safe territories. She's the one who eventually suggested I approach your pack for formal asylum, said there were treaties, protections in place. Her laugh was bitter. Guess she was wrong about that. Or she was working with Bran. Cade's eyes narrowed. What do you remember about this Elena? Not much. She was kind, patient, helped me control my shifts when grief made me unstable. Sarah closed her eyes, pulling up memories she'd tried to forget. She had a scar, here. She touched the side of her neck. And she always wore a pendant. Silver, with some kind of crest I didn't recognize. Cade went very still. Describe the crest. Why? Just describe it. A wolf's head in profile, with 3 stars above it, and... Sarah stopped as Cade pulled out a piece of paper, quickly sketching. When he turned it toward her, she gasped. That's it? How did you know? Because that's the Shadow Fang pack crest. Cade's expression darkened. You were never in a neutral shelter, Seraphina. You were in Dante's territory the whole time, under his control. The implications crashed over her. He's been planning this. For years. Ever since I was 10 years old, he's been positioning you, controlling your movements. Maybe he's the one who fed information to Bran. Maybe he's the reason you ended up in my dungeon instead of dead, kept you hidden but alive, waiting for the right moment to reveal you. Cade's hands clenched into fists. The question is why? What does he gain from the last Silver Moon wolf suddenly reappearing after all these years? Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. The Silver Moon line was the oldest in the Northern Territories. Some packs believed we had the strongest claim to regional leadership, even though we never pursued it. She looked at Cade. If Dante has control over me, if he could force a bond, a marriage, he'd have legitimate claim to challenge every alpha in the region, including me. With your bloodline backing his authority, he could unite the packs under Shadowfang rule. Cade's voice went cold and lethal. That's his play. And he almost pulled it off. He still might. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. I'm weak. I don't have a pack. I'm one wolf against someone who's been orchestrating this for over a decade. You're not alone. The words hung between them. Sarah turned to find Cade watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I failed you once, he said quietly. I won't do it again. Whatever Dante's planning, whatever move he makes next, we face it together. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why would you risk your pack, your position, for me? The daughter of the wolves your father murdered. Cade stepped closer, and Sarah could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the war in his silver eyes, duty versus something else, something neither of them wanted to name. Because when I heard your howl tonight, something in me recognized it, answered it. His voice dropped. Because every instinct I have is screaming that this isn't political or strategic. This is something else. Something I don't understand, but can't ignore. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She should step back, should maintain distance, should remember that this was the son of her family's murderer, that 3 years of her life had been stolen because of his blindness. But she didn't step back. Your father wanted my mother, she said. He killed her and my father when she chose love over politics. What makes this different? Because I'm not my father. Cade's hand rose, hovering near her face but not touching. And because I'm not asking you to choose anything, I'm just asking you to let me make this right, however long it takes. Before Sarah could respond, the study door burst open. Marcus stood there, rain-soaked and breathing hard. Cade, we have a situation. The northern border again. Dante's left scouts behind, 6 of them, watching our patrol patterns. Marcus's gaze flicked to Sarah, then back to his alpha. And there's something else. We found tracks. Someone's been surveilling the fortress for weeks. Professional work, military grade. Show me, Cade said immediately. He turned to Sarah. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except Nadia or me. I'm not helpless, Sarah protested. No, but you're weak, newly healed, and a target.
Cade's expression softened slightly. Please, give me a few hours to secure the perimeter. Then we'll figure out our next move. Together. He was gone before she could argue, Marcus at his heels. Sarah stood alone in the study, surrounded by books and firelight and the lingering warmth of Cade's presence. She should be planning escape, should be figuring out how to get as far from both Cade and Dante as possible. Instead, she found herself drawn back to the journal, back to the mad ravings of a wolf who'd let obsession destroy everything good in his life. The amber line ends. It has to. But it hadn't ended. She'd survived. And now 2 alphas were circling her like wolves around wounded prey, one seeking control, the other seeking redemption. The question was, which one would she choose? Or would she finally choose herself? When the past and present collide, the fallout can destroy everything. But sometimes, from the ashes of old hatred, something unexpected begins to grow. The choice of wolves. The attack came 3 hours before dawn. Sarah woke to the sound of shattering glass and howls, not of pain, but of war. She rolled off the couch where she'd been dozing, her body moving on instincts she'd thought beaten out of her in the dungeon. Through the study window, she could see chaos in the courtyard below. Wolves in both human and shifted forms, fighting in deadly silence broken only by snarls and the clash of weapons. She recognized the attacker's scent even before she saw their formation. Shadowfang. Dante had moved faster than anyone anticipated. The study door splintered inward. Sarah spun, ready to fight with her bare hands if necessary, but it was Marcus who stood there, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. You need to come with me, now. What's happening? Dante's making his play. He's got 40 wolves surrounding the fortress, demanding you be turned over to his custody. Cade's holding them off, but... Marcus grabbed her arm. There's something else. We found evidence in Bran's old quarters. Letters. He wasn't working for Dante. He was working for the Council of Elders. Sarah's blood went cold. The Council, the governing body that supposedly maintained peace between packs, hadn't been involved in pack affairs for decades. They'd gone silent after the bloodline purge, retreating to their mountain sanctuary. Why would the Council want me imprisoned? Because your bloodline didn't just have the oldest claim to leadership. According to these letters, the Amber Wolves had something else, a gift, the ability to... Marcus stopped as another explosion rocked the fortress. No time. I need to get you to the safe room. No. Sarah pulled free from his grasp. Where's Cade? The north gate, but... She was already moving, running through corridors she'd learned during her hours in the study. Her body screamed in protest, still weak, still healing, but adrenaline and something deeper drove her forward. The bond she'd felt when Cade had knelt in her cell, the recognition that had passed between them, it was pulling her toward him like a compass finding north. She burst into the courtyard to find carnage. Cade stood at the center, in half-shifted form, a terrifying state between human and wolf, all muscle and fury and alpha dominance. He was holding off 6 Shadowfang wolves at once, his pack fighting desperately to reach him but blocked by overwhelming numbers. And there, watching from the far wall, was Dante Shadowfang, smiling. Seraphina. His voice carried across the battlefield, amplified by alpha power. This can end. Come with me willingly, and I'll call off my wolves. Your Alpha Blackstone and his pack can live. Refuse, and I'll kill every wolf in this fortress, starting with him.
Sarah's feet carried her forward before her mind could process the decision. She stepped into the open ground between the two forces, and everything went still. Wolves froze mid-strike. Cade's silver eyes found hers, widening with horror. "Seraphina, no," he growled. "Get back inside." "Listen to your alpha," Dante called, "although I appreciate the dramatic entrance." Very fitting for a silver moon. He descended from the wall, moving with casual confidence. "But he's right. This isn't your fight. You're just the prize." "That's where you're wrong." Sarah's voice rang out stronger than she expected. "I was never a prize. I was a weapon. That's what you've been planning for all these years, isn't it, Dante? That's what the council feared." Dante's smile faltered. Just slightly, but enough. Cade's beta, Marcus, had said the Amber Wolves had a gift. Sarah had never understood what that meant. Her parents had died before they could teach her, and she'd spent her teenage years just trying to survive. But now, facing down two alphas and their packs, something ancient stirred in her blood. Memory. Not her own, but inherited. Passed down through generations of Amber Wolves. "The Amber bloodline doesn't just have the oldest claim to leadership," she said, pieces clicking together. "We had the ability to challenge any alpha's bond with their pack, to test whether they ruled through strength or fear, whether they deserved their authority or had simply taken it." She could feel it now, thrumming beneath her skin. The gift that had made her ancestors both respected and feared. The reason they'd been content to serve as advisors rather than rulers. They were the balance, the check against tyrants. "That's why your father wanted my mother dead," Sarah said to Cade. "Not just because she rejected him. Because she could have exposed him as a tyrant with a single howl. Could have severed his bond with his pack and left him powerless." "And that's why I want you alive," Dante finished, his casual mask slipping to reveal cold calculation. "With your ability under my control, I could challenge every alpha in the Northern Territories, prove them unworthy, claim their packs." He took another step forward. "The council put you in that dungeon because they feared what you represent. Change. Evolution. The end of their carefully maintained balance of power." "But here's what you didn't account for," Sarah said, and she felt her wolf rising, felt power flooding through her weakened body. "I'm not a tool to be used. I'm not a prize to be won. I'm a silver moon wolf, and I choose my own fate." She shifted. It had been 3 years since she'd allowed herself to transform, and the change hurt like rebirth. But when she stood on 4 legs, her amber fur gleaming in the pre-dawn light, Sarah felt whole for the first time since the chains had closed around her wrists. She threw her head back and howled. The sound was nothing like the desperate cry that had brought Cade to her cell. This was power made audible, legacy given voice. It rolled across the courtyard and beyond, carrying the weight of generations. And in that howl was a challenge, not of violence, but of truth. She felt the bonds between alphas and their packs shimmer into her awareness like visible threads. Cade's bonds were strong, tempered by respect and hard-won loyalty. His wolves followed him because he'd earned their devotion, not demanded it. Dante's bonds were different. They pulsed with compulsion,
with fear disguised as respect. She could feel the fractures in them, places where force had replaced trust. "No!" Dante lunged forward, but it was too late. Sarah's howl reached its crescendo, and in that moment she made her choice. Not to destroy Dante's bonds, that would leave his wolves broken and lost, but to reveal them, to show every wolf present the truth of what held their pack together. Dante's wolves stumbled, their eyes widening as they suddenly felt the compulsion they'd been living under. Some fell to their knees, others simply stared at their alpha with betrayal written across their faces. "You lied," one of them, a scarred female wolf, said. "About everything. The treaty, the mission, the reason we came here. You told us we were rescuing a prisoner, but you were just taking another one." Dante's face contorted with rage. He shifted, launching himself at Sarah with killing intent. He never reached her. Cade intercepted mid-leap, and the two alphas collided with bone-shattering force. They rolled across the courtyard, a blur of fur and fangs and fury. But this wasn't a fight between equals. Cade fought to protect, driven by instinct and something deeper. The bond that had been forming between him and Sarah since the moment he'd heard her howl. Dante fought to possess, driven by ambition and wounded pride. There was only ever going to be one outcome. When Cade's jaws closed around Dante's throat, the Shadowfang Alpha finally went still. Not dead. Cade wasn't his father, didn't rule through slaughter, but defeated. Definitively, publicly defeated. "Submit," Cade growled, the word emerging mangled from his shifted throat. "Or I end this." Dante's eyes found Sarah's. For just a moment, she saw something that might have been regret, or perhaps just rage that his perfect plan had fallen apart. He submitted, exposing his throat in the ultimate gesture of surrender. Cade released him, stepping back but remaining between Dante and Sarah. The message was clear. "This wolf is under my protection. Challenge her, and you challenge me." As dawn broke over the fortress, painting the courtyard in shades of gold and amber, Sarah shifted back to human form. She stood naked and unashamed, her body still bearing the marks of chains, but her spirit finally free. "The Shadowfang wolves are welcome to stay until their alpha recovers," Cade said, his voice carrying to every wolf present. "But they stay as guests, not invaders. And when they leave, they do so with a message for the Council of Elders." He moved to stand beside Sarah, not touching but close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. The amber line didn't end. It survived, and it will not be imprisoned again, not by fear, not by ambition, not by any wolf who thinks power means control. Cade's silver eyes swept across the assembled wolves. "The Silver Moon bloodline stands under Blackstone protection. Any wolf who challenges, that challenges me." Silence fell across the courtyard. Then, one by one, wolves from both packs lowered their heads in acknowledgement. Not submission, respect, recognition. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, though she couldn't have said if they were from grief or relief or something else entirely. Cade turned to her, and in his eyes she saw everything they hadn't said, everything that had been building since that storm-dark night in the dungeon. "You're free," he said quietly, just for her. Truly free. You can stay. You can go. You can demand anything from me. Reparations, vengeance, exile for every wolf who played a part in your imprisonment. It's your choice. Sarah looked at him, at this alpha who had found her in darkness and offered truth instead of comfort, partnership instead of possession. The son of the wolf who'd killed her family, who carried that guilt like a visible weight, who had proven, in the end, that he was nothing like his father.
I want... She stopped, gathering courage for the most terrifying words she'd ever spoken. I want to stay. Not as a prisoner or a guest or a political tool, just as myself. And I want to figure out what this is between us. This bond that terrifies me but feels more right than anything has in 10 years. A smile, genuine, transformative, broke across Cade's face. I'd like that too. He extended his hand, and Sarah took it. Not a surrender, not a debt paid, just two wolves, scarred by the past but choosing to face the future together. As the sun rose fully, burning away the last shadows of night, Sarah Silvermoon stood in the courtyard of Blackstone Fortress, and finally, believed she might be home. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the same study where Cade had first offered her truth. But now it was her study too, her books on those shelves, her blanket draped over the couch. The fortress had become her refuge rather than her prison, its wolves her pack rather than her captors. The journey hadn't been easy. Some wolves struggled to accept her, to see past the legacy of the purge. Others had left entirely, unable to reconcile their loyalty to the old ways with the change she represented. But most had stayed, and in staying, they'd helped build something new, a pack that honored the past without being enslaved by it. Cade entered through the door they now left unlocked between their adjoining chambers. He carried 2 mugs of tea, offering her one with the easy familiarity of partners who'd learned each other's rhythms. The council sent another message, he said, settling into his chair. They want to meet, formally recognize your bloodline, and offer reparations for Bran's actions. Do you believe them? Not even a little bit. Cade's smile was sharp. But we'll meet them anyway. Show them that the Amber Wolves aren't hiding anymore. Sarah sipped her tea, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. She'd been training with Cade's pack, rebuilding her strength, learning to use the gifts her bloodline had given her. She wasn't the broken prisoner from the dungeon anymore. She was becoming something else, something powerful. There's one other thing, Cade said, his tone shifting to something more uncertain. About the mate bond. We don't have to rush. I know what my father tried to force on your mother, and I never want you to feel... Sarah set down her mug and crossed to him, settling into his lap and silencing him with a kiss that tasted of tea and promise and home. I know what your father did, she said when they finally broke apart. And I know you're not him. I've known that for months, so when I say this, believe me, I choose you, not because of bonds or bloodlines or politics. I choose you because you're the wolf who heard my howl in the dark and came to find me, who offered truth when lies would have been easier, who fights beside me instead of for me. Cade's arms tightened around her, and when he kissed her again, Sarah felt the mate bond settle into place. Not forced, not desperate, but chosen, freely chosen. Outside, she could hear wolves training in the courtyard, could sense the pulse of pack life flowing through the fortress. Her fortress now. Her pack. She'd been chained in darkness, believing she would die forgotten. Instead, she'd been found. And in being found,
she'd discovered something she never expected. Not just freedom, but love. Not just survival, but a future worth fighting for. The amber line hadn't ended. It had only been waiting to rise again. The end. Thank you for joining Sarah and Cade on their journey from darkness to dawn. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who believes in the power of second chances and the strength it takes to choose love over fear. What did you think of Sarah's transformation? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your thoughts inspire more stories like this.